and built here at home with Canadian workers and Canadian industry. I would now like to introduce the Prime Minister, whose vision, whose determination, and whose leadership has made today entirely possible. Ladies and gentlemen, the Right Honourable Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Thank you, David, for that introduction. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, colleagues, for all being here and for what you do for Canadians every day. It is, let me say to the members, the women and men of the Margaret Brook, the members of the forces present here, also to those members of the forces across Canada, to those members of the forces around the world. On behalf of all Canadians, thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you. Thank you for your sacrifice. And thank you for representing the very best of our country every single day. Since 1759, generations of service members have called this base home. Today, CFB Halifax is Canada's largest military base, home to over 10,000 CAP members. All those members have taken on enormous responsibilities, knowing that discharging those responsibilities requires extraordinary personal sacrifice, and they're doing so to protect the peace and security of Canada and protect our allies. Yet for too long, instead of reinforcing your strength, we've relied too heavily on your dedication alone to keep Canadians secure. Well, no more. In the first week of the election campaign, my colleagues and I thought we committed to pay our women and men in uniform properly and to arm them with the best equipment. And we're getting it done. Les principes qui avaient guidé la politique de défense et la politique étrangère du Canada pendant des décennies qui avaient été complètement bouleversés. Les menaces auxquelles nous sommes confrontés sont nombreuses et ne cessent de s'étendre. Qu'il s'agisse d'incursions dans notre Arctique ou d'attaques visant notre cyberespace. The very nature of warfare is changing rapidly. It's driven by the proliferation of drones, autonomous systems, weapons in orbit. We know the world has changed, and we know that Canada must change with it. A little over a decade ago, in 2014, Canada's defense spending had fallen to just 1% of our GDP. Our military infrastructure and equipment had aged, hindering our military readiness. And that's why just 6 weeks after forming government, we announced ambitious plans to rebuild, rearm, and reinvest in the Canadian forces. Our core objective of that plan, not the only one, but a core objective, is to achieve NATO's 2% target this year. That's the highest level of defense spending relative to the size of our economy since the fall of the Berlin Wall. We embarked on this mission to protect Canadians, to defend our territory, to protect our borders, and to boost our sovereignty. Because nous sommes maîtres chez nous. We control our destiny. I am pleased to announce today that we have kept that ambitious promise. For the last 10 months, Canada's new government has been working with unprecedented speed and scale. In 10 months, we have invested over $60 billion in our defense and security. That's the largest year-on-year increase in defense investment in generations. And as a result of these efforts, this morning, NATO confirmed that Canada has achieved its 2% defense expenditure target, half a decade ahead of the original schedule. So the first time, as I said, since the fall of the Berlin Wall, we'll be spending that 2% of GDP on defense. Now, What is very encouraging is not just that Canadians recognize the need to reinforce our security, but Canadians are responding to our renewed commitment and to the call to serve, a call that the women and men here have already responded to. But since the summer of last year, since June, applications to join the Canadian Armed Forces are up 13%. Il faut le dire que l'objectif de 2% ne constitue pas un plafond pour les investissements du Canada dans le domaine de la défense, mais plutôt une préférence. En juin, nous avons convenu d'investir 3,5% dans les dépenses militaires et 1,5% de plus dans les dépenses d'infrastructures essentielles comme les routes et les ponts. To accelerate our efforts, today we're announcing a package of...
Whoa.
What's that?
I just built a budgeting app in Base 44.
Guys, Nina just built an app.
Impossible.
Nina can't.
Militaire et 1,5% de plus dans les dépenses d'infrastructures essentielles comme les routes et les ponts. To accelerate our efforts, today we're announcing a package of infrastructure and real property investments across Atlantic Canada worth more than $3 billion. In Nova Scotia, we're making major targeted investments to modernize critical infrastructure, to build new facilities to support the next generation of naval and air fleets, and to expand our training and operational capacity. To be specific, we're investing over $1 billion to modernize the heating, electrical, fire protection systems at CFB Dockyard and Stadacona. We're investing $640 million in a new contract at 14 Wing Greenwood to build the hangar and the drone infrastructure needed to support Canadian multi-mission aircraft. There's over $180 million to build the Combatant Training and Integration Center, obviously supporting training, operations, and integration for the Royal Canadian Navy's future River-class destroyers. There's more than $80 million to acquire Halifax Gate, a massive waterfront industrial site in Dartmouth that will support current and future Canadian Royal Navy operations. And we're acquiring new residential units in Nova Scotia for Canadian Armed Forces members and their families. In New Brunswick, we're investing more than $1 billion in CFB Gagetown to recapitalize our primary Army training area, introduce new ground-based air defense systems, and ensure our soldiers train on infrastructure built for the next century. We're upgrading our transition centers in the province for CAF members and their families, because every member of our forces deserves a safe, high-quality place to call home. This $3 billion package we're announcing today reaffirms Canada's new approach to support and invest in our armed forces. And I want to take a few minutes to outline that approach. It rests on 4 pillars. The first is to invest in the foundations, the very foundations of our defense. It's where I started. The women and men who serve, and the equipment and infrastructure that they use. Secondly, we're expanding and enhancing our military capabilities. Third, while we do so, we're strengthening Canada's defense industry. And finally, we're diversifying our defense partnerships. Our greatest strength is the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces. They carry the flag. They risk their lives for us and for our values. Their pay should reflect the weight of their responsibilities. And that's why we implemented the largest pay raise for the Canadian Armed Forces in a generation, with all members of the CAF receiving a pay rise. Those pay rises were retroactive to April 1st of last year, and they were increases on top of base pay, putting more money in the pockets of all members. We also introduced a new military service pay benefit, specifically tied to time in service, so paychecks honor years in uniform. Et si les membres des forces armées sont appelés à intervenir sur le territoire canadien en cas d'inondation, de feux de forêt ou d'autres catastrophes, nous reconnaissons aujourd'hui l'importance des services qu'ils nous rendent en leur accordant une augmentation de salaire. Une rémunération plus élevée est synonyme d'une meilleure résilience financière, d'une plus grande stabilité, d'un plus large choix de carrière pour les conjoints et davantage des possibilités pour les enfants afin de réaliser leurs rêves. The second pillar of our strategy is expanding and enhancing those military capabilities. We're overhauling the very way we arm our Canadian forces, so they have the tools they need to keep Canadians safe. Over the next decade, Canada will unleash $500 billion, I'll repeat, $500 billion in defense and defense-related investment, from submarines and aircraft to drones, sensors, and radar systems. We will build the essential infrastructure that our security needs. I'll give an important example. Less than 2 weeks ago, Minister of National Defense and other colleagues and I were in Yellowknife. I want to say that it was considerably colder than it is today. It was minus 35. We were in Yellowknife. We announced a $40 billion investment in Canada's North and Arctic. New military infrastructure, from northern operational support hubs to the Mackenzie Valley Highway and the Grays Bay Road and Port Project, which effectively link our high Arctic assets, military assets, civilian assets, to south of 60. Today, we know that sovereignty requires much more than just conventional defense. It requires reliable access to critical strategic capabilities, such as space-based communications and unhindered access to artificial intelligence. It requires digital sovereignty, beginning with sovereign cloud and extending through the entire intelligence infrastructure stack. So defense spending and defense-related spending includes things like our Quantum Champions program that's supporting cutting-edge technology and intellectual property in Canada. It includes our $200 million investment in sovereign space launch capabilities, which will mean that Canada will have our own access to space. We don't have to depend on another country. Through Borealis, we're coordinating and accelerating Canada's defense research and innovation in frontier technologies, including quantum and AI. So, from domestic ammunition production, such as Colt, and over-the-horizon radar, to quantum, to AI and drones, we're building with Canadian materials, Canadian expertise, and Canadian workers all across this country. L'autonomie stratégique n'est pas un synonyme d'isolement. Elle consiste à être suffisamment fort pour être un partenaire de choix plutôt qu'un partenaire dépendant. Elle consiste à mettre en place une base industrielle de la défense nationale afin de ne jamais devoir dépendre des décisions des autres pays. So the third pillar of our mission is to strengthen our domestic industrial base. We've launched the Defense Investment Agency to streamline procurement, cut duplicative approvals, and get the Canadian Armed Forces members the equipment they need fast. It's already delivering results. Last week, Minister McGuinty and Secretary of State Fuhrer announced a new contract to Kitchener-based Colt Canada to procure 65,000 new rifles for the forces, replacing the current stock, which, has to be said, has been in service for more than 35 years. Last month, we announced Canada's first ever defense industrial strategy, a bold plan to get our forces what they need when they need it, and to scale at the same time Canadian defense industrial companies putting hundreds of billions of dollars to work in the strategic sectors of our economy, creating more than 125,000 jobs for Canadian women and men. Our framework's simple: build, partner, buy. We're focused first, and this is a big change, we're focused first on building in Canada, directing procurement to Canadian firms where we have those capabilities. Where we can't build, will partner with like-minded allies and do so in a way that attracts inbound investment, transfers intellectual property, and integrates supply chains so that public dollars flow back to Canada. And only in those cases, and they will exist, but only in those cases where we've exhausted those first two options will we buy from a diverse range of partners abroad. As I said, our defense industrial strategy is designed to create over 100.
You met Brenda on the set of Changeland. Fast forward 8 years and two kids, and you know, really settling down roots of
Double our investment. Our framework's simple: build, partner, buy. We're focused first, and this is a big change, we're focused first on building in Canada, directing procurement to Canadian firms where we have those capabilities. Where we can't build, we'll partner with like-minded allies and do so in a way that attracts inbound investment, transfers intellectual property, and integrates supply chains so that public dollars flow back to Canada. And only in those cases, and they will exist, but only in those cases where we've exhausted those first two options will we buy from a diverse range of partners abroad. As I said, our defense industrial strategy is designed to create over 125,000, not just jobs, but high-paying careers, and all the while double our investment in defense R&D. The final element of our strategy is diversifying those defense partnerships. We've already agreed a comprehensive strategic partnership with the European Union, and we're the only non-EU country to join SAFE, which is their defense procurement arrangement. We've signed 20 defense and trade partnerships on 4 continents over the past 10 months. Mes collègues, aux femmes et aux hommes des forces armées canadiennes, vous servez notre pays. Vous faites des sacrifices. Vous assurez la sécurité du Canada. Vous incarnez ce qu'il y a de meilleur dans ce pays. Au cours de la dernière année, j'ai visité les bases militaires des sites d'opération à travers le pays et dans le monde entier. À Halifax, à Trenton, ainsi qu'à Yellowknife, à Nanu's Bay et Esquimalt. De l'opération Assurance en Lettonie à l'exercice Cold Response dans le nord de la Norvège. J'ai pu constater par moi-même votre courage et votre dévouement envers votre mission. Mes collègues et moi-même sommes déterminés à nous assurer que vous disposez de tout ce dont vous avez besoin pour servir notre pays. To conclude, in moments of crisis, when people see the maple leaf on a sleeve, they see hope and they get help. Whether that's training Ukrainian soldiers or standing on guard for Canada in the Arctic. Over the past 11 months, our government's key priority has been to reinvest, rebuild, and rearm the Canadian Armed Forces to provide you with the support you need to achieve every mission's success. We're just getting started. We'll continue with our efforts at the same speed and determination we've shown from the very beginning. In this century, the work of defending Canada is also the work of building Canada. Security and prosperity aren't competing priorities. They're mutually reinforcing foundations of a strong and sovereign Canada. The true North, strong and free. You know, because in the end, in a more fractured and darker world, Canadian leadership will be defined not just by the value of our strength, but by the strength of our value of our strength.
Tired of dealing with many opened tabs and trying to organize them manually? It's easy to get started with
In this century, the work of defending Canada is also the work of building Canada. Security and prosperity aren't competing priorities. They're mutually reinforcing foundations of a strong and sovereign Canada. The true North, strong and free. You know, because in the end, In a more fractured and darker world, Canadian leadership will be defined not just by the value of our strength, but by the strength of our value, or value of our strength, sorry. I'm going to redo that. I'm going to redo that. Because it will not just be, our leadership will not just be defined by the strength of our values, but also the value of our strength. Because this is the key point. The foundation of strength is standing around me and behind me. And it's on that strength that we're building Canada strong and free. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister.